Listening to my recollections here on the channel, many of you may assume that I grew up a rich, spoiled brat whose parents gave him everything he ever wanted. The reality was far more interesting, however. Growing up, my family and I were dirt poor for most of my early childhood. Until I was about 10 years of age, we lived in project housing in what was considered the poorest area of town. Luckily, we had a kid named Brian that was the neighborhood celebrity when it came to video games. He owned an Atari 2600 and a ton of games, and the kids flocked to his house often to play them. I've always been thankful for his mother for tolerating us invading her home so often and no doubt making more noise than we should have. My father eventually got a 2600 for our house, but by then the platform was long in decline and I didn't care much for it. When we finally got away from the projects, we moved into a small basement apartment where I shared a bedroom with my two younger sisters. It was a proper roach-infested shithole. 700 square feet of a tiny kitchen, a single bathroom for 5 people, and a living room that barely held a couch and a chair. Fortunately, my mother was coming up in the world. She had been putting herself through school and scoring better jobs over those early years, and in 1986, I got my very own Nintendo Entertainment System. I was so thankful that my mother worked as hard as she did, and though we were still broke as all get out, she still managed an impressive Christmas on that limited budget. Though I loved and played my NES a ton, I was locked to playing it on a small 13-inch black and white television, a hand-me-down I scored for free. And for 3 years that was my lot in life, sharing a room with my two baby sisters, playing a Nintendo Entertainment System in black and white on a little screen. That was until 1989 rolled around and my world changed forever. 1989 was an interesting year in my life for a bunch of reasons. That was the very first year my father's job inquired about me helping the business. His boss ran a place called Mobile Hydraulic Power Wash, a service that would wash just about anything and did sandblasting as well. When the business took on a new account for the local Pepsi-Cola plants, they needed help, and I was called in to do some pre-soak work. Essentially, it was just washing large delivery trucks and preparing them to be spray cleaned. I can't tell you how thankful I was to get that opportunity, because it would ultimately lead to a steady income that would power the hobby of gaming for me. The owner of the company took a chance on a younger teenager, and I did my best to make the most of it. Also in 1989, I discovered gaming magazines. It's true I knew of the likes of Nintendo Power far earlier, but I could never afford those. I saw other kids with them in school, but that was about as close as I ever got to it myself. It was that year that both GamePro and Electronic Gaming Monthly showed up, exposing me to the vast world of gaming, much of which I knew absolutely nothing about. Also that year I began to see the commercials for Sega's brand new 16-bit console, the Genesis. Boasting arcade power, the footage that they showed was like visual crack that I couldn't look away from. I had really enjoyed having my NES, and I had played many great games, but the notion of an arcade machine in my home was tantalizing, if not outright unbelievable. The little bit of work I was doing was getting me some pocket change at that time, so I knew that if I had any hope at all of getting a Genesis, it would have to be at Christmas, and it would have to come from my mother.
Dave Whitney wanted the real arcade games at home, so he got them. Mike Rogers wanted them too, but he got a Genesis system by Sega. Why? Check it out. Arcade screen left, Genesis screen right. If they look the same, you've answered correctly. Besides, Genesis has real-life action in sports games, flying games, and adventure games. The hottest library going. So if you want real arcade action, there's only 2 ways to get it.
Dave, we got your golden axe.
Or get Genesis by Sega. We bring the arcade experience home.
As 1989 came to a close, I made it very clear to my mom what I wanted, how much it cost, and where she could get it. For a stretch of time, things were very unsure whether it would happen or not, but when Christmas came, that brand new Sega Genesis was under the tree in all its 16-bit glory. My mom had come through big, and I was once again thankful for her dedication to her children when it mattered the most. We didn't get much in terms of big-ticket items during the year, but when my mom set out to make Christmas a happy time, she was nothing less than a miracle worker. That night, I remember playing Altered Beasts on the color living room TV for hours. I was blown away by those visuals, and I kept saying to myself, "This is the arcade, this is the arcade, and I have it in my own home." The excitement of that night lives bright in my memory like it just happened. I was also quite well aware that once Christmas was over, my Genesis would be relegated to the bedroom, where it would be tethered to the ancient black and white TV I had. It seemed cruel and unnatural to have a console so powerful hooked up to a display that could do it no justice. I knew what I had to do.
Power up.
1990 was another interesting year for me. I was another year older and officially became an employee of the Power Wash Company. I worked a bit more and had a bit more money. In fact, I worked as much as I could given my age and the opportunities given to me. That work ethic had been instilled in me thanks to my mom, and I will be forever grateful for it. I saw her go from cleaning up piss and shit, going to night school, and taking care of a family, to working for the phone company as an operator, pulling us along with her as she ascended. I knew the more heart you put into something, the more you got in return. And if I wanted games and a new TV, I was gonna have to work for it. That summer my mom took me to Curtis Mathis, a rent-to-own store that specialized in electronics and furniture, and allowed me to get my first real television. It was a 13-inch color display with RCA jacks. Man, I can't even begin to tell you how excited I was to get it home and get my Genesis hooked up. If you recall, the Genesis came with both RF and composite cables originally, and I was finally gonna see my Genesis hooked up the way it always should have been. I'd leave games running, headphones plugged into the front, and listening to the sound test and demos while I did my homework. During this time, I also learned how to manage and save money quite effectively. Since I knew my mom didn't have the funds to buy me new Genesis games, I began to rent and buy my own. Revenge of Shinobi had been a huge purchase, as was Golden Axe. Those magazines I mentioned earlier also played a major role in my expanding world of video games. I began to pay attention to Japanese releases and the overall import scene. I discovered import companies that sold games in the back of those magazines. Say what you will about the quality of those publications, but they were often a doorway to knowledge many of us wouldn't have had otherwise. Especially a kid like me living in a podunk mountain town in Virginia. As the year grew to a close, my mom took me to the local indoor mall out of the blue, scored me eSWAT City Under Siege as an early Christmas present. I did not get full-priced retail games often, so this was a major shock and one of the happiest moments of that year. Once again, my mom was teaching me the value of making your own money and the rewards for working hard. In 1990, I had a Genesis, rented and borrowed many games for it, got my first real color TV, discovered import gaming, and began to realize how truly lucky I was to have the mom I was given. This Thanksgiving, I wanted to share with you the things I'm thankful for. I'm thankful for the friend's mother that gave my crew her home for hours at a time so we could have a little enjoyment in our lives. I'm thankful for the friends and classmates that lent a poor kid their games so selflessly, allowing me experiences I never would have had on my own. I'm thankful for the job that was entrusted to me despite my age, and all the opportunity that opened up. I'm thankful I always had a roof over my head and a warm bed to sleep in despite my family's rather limited means. I'm thankful for those Christmases where I scored an expensive item that many other kids in my situation would have never seen. I'm also extremely thankful for all of you. You have taken this small channel and turned it into something that helps me support my family. But I'm most thankful for my mother, the woman who constantly taught me life lessons even when I didn't realize it. The woman who raised 3 kids while she improved herself, and in the process, improved all of us. The woman that made me the man I am today. This one's for you, Mom, and I wouldn't be here today without you. I'm Sega Lord X. Thank you all for being there, and I will catch you next time.